Okay, I'm with a really remarkable and a spunky lady, if I had to use that adjective for my friend Tobi Goldfus. She's a therapist and author presently located in the great state of Maryland. And she's the author of the book From Real Life to Cyberspace, Helping Our Young People Develop a Strong Inner Selfie. And I thought today would be a good day for us to chat a little bit about not just about the topics that she's been writing about, but also how things have changed for her and her work with all this pandemic related situation going on. So, Tobi, thanks so much for talking with me today.
Absolutely, I'm glad to be here.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit about how technology, has changed not just the way that you interact with your clients, but also your clients and how you've had to navigate that uh, from uh, from how you started in practicing.
Well, sure. I first, I want to say how I've always been interested in the adolescent and young adult.
Mhm.
I think also because I've never forgotten what that was like for me as a young person myself. And I also, as I reflect back on what was memorable to me, um, before I knew what the word experiential was. Um, for example, dancing in my room to Janis Joplin to get a lot of strong emotions out, or having a friend give me a horsewhip actually and tell me to go in the backyard and whip it as hard as I could to get all my feelings out, and how impactful that was, as well as who in my life, what adult in my life did I remember as being interested in me. So taking some of those experiences in terms of my work as a therapist, when we became more cyberspace savvy, and most of our young people were using social media a lot, I began to be aware of the need to understand what's going on online, because social media is where a lot of things are happening for our young people. And I began to be aware of uh, Paul, how they're using social media and have for a long time to practice things like their developmental stages of, just even with identity versus role confusion and intimacy versus isolation and ego states being practiced online. And I really wanted to understand how to connect in that way. So I also developed a social media assessment form that I give all my young clients and have for years now to understand what platforms they're on, how much they use, and their feelings about that. So that when we start working, they know that I'm interested in that part of their life, which is a big part of their life. And when I wrote the book, I was looking at some of the phenomena that happens online, which is, all social media is hypnotic, basically. And the hypnotic pull to social media can be as strong as anything we can do in real life. And I began to look at all of that. And also, what are the vulnerability factors that create our young people to be more vulnerable sometimes to things that are happening online, and how could I help them create a better balance? The most important thing, of course, as you know, because you're this way, is that we know that universal evolutionary need to connect and to orient and attune ourselves is the number one thing we need to do. And with young people, this is so important for them to feel from us and for them to feel we're interested in all of them. So interestingly enough, some of those predicating factors that make them more vulnerable, according to research, would be the amount of time they spend on social media. One of those would be over 4 to 6 hours, which of course with the pandemic has shifted a lot for all of us. And another one of the vulnerability factors would be how multiple platforms can also interfere, as well as, of course, economic, what social life, family life is like, if they've been traumatized or victims before. However, I do want to say first that I do think that social media has more positive aspects to it also than the negative ones. So that it brings people together. It allows them to connect with others. And there's all kinds of creativity and wonderful things happening on social media. So I wanted to focus on those too, but be aware of this other stuff going on that I could help them balance. So I had this thing, maybe, not sure where you, so there's the thing to help them understand what I call cyber sincerity and cyber trust, because only the sender really understands that. And we see a lot of drama going on with our clients, and we need to know how much of that is online and what's being resolved, and how I can help them be more positive, because there's lots of their life is going on online. So there's been a shift, of course, with the pandemic and the young person staying at home, even from college. And so that shift for myself, even from going to being online, I have a couple hours maybe at the most a day because of seeing clients in real life and my life. Most of us are online many hours a day now, and that includes our young clients. So the shift in that is to also help them make that more alive and more vital. And so there's things that I've been trying to help them with, and that includes bringing in what I call digital Zen. Okay, so you might, so how we reach out and we kind of like touch each other in being present and being attuned and just being with them and letting them feel safe, because safety right now is incredibly important. It's always been important, but even more so online. There's a lot of stories I receive, and also the amount of time. And I know I'm a little over the map, but so I am entering 90% of the time a young person, adolescent, or young adult's bedroom. And I feel like I'm entering an honored space there, a sacred space. And they're letting me into their safe place, which I believe it gives us an implicit trust. And by entering that space and having a conversation or working with them, I'm just incredibly always so, besides the fact that we need to remember humor and having fun, and they have so much humor and so much, I've learned so much from my young clients, and I admire them, is that now their rooms have become like their dorms or their place to spend their time, instead of the parents always wanting them out of the room. Right now it's almost essential to them at times for their self-preservation because of the interface they're doing in their life in their rooms. Some of them are going back to college now, Paul, but they're very, I just talked to a college student who had that quarantine, she's quarantining in her room for 2 weeks, and there's fear. And so, the important part of allowing our young clients to really resonate with what their goals are and encourage the part of them that sometimes is self-doubting or discouraged or anxious and depressed, and utilizing some of the ways we can do it in a more experiential, evocative way online is part of my goal and part of what I'm trying to do.
Right, right. And it seems to me that like anything, online interaction, internet interaction is, it's a double-edged sword. There's always a balance in the world of good and bad, if you want to look at it that way.
Exactly.
The what I'd read the other day is that people, like for example, Facebook, after about 30 to 40 minutes of being on Facebook, you reach a happiness feeling, but then after about 30 or 40 minutes, it starts to decline. But
Mm-hmm.
yet they're finding the time period of being on social media is getting longer. And so with that decline, we kind of have a, um, you know, a almost a setup to where by the time that they're done viewing, they have missed a lot of that early emotional positive of the beginning, and it kind of wants them to go back and recapture that. And they hope the longer they stay on it, the better that we all will feel when we're doing it. And I can tell you as someone who teaches college, it's been kind of strange as I leave my office and going into the classroom. And there are times where I wonder if anyone showed up for class, because I will walk in and no one out of 32 people in a classroom is speaking to each other. They're all doing social media or something with their phone.
Exactly.
And it's a
Yeah.
different way of being in the world. And I can't say that's all positive, but it's certainly not all negative either.
No, and you as a teacher, a professor would absolutely capture that. And what I really try to help them do, because like you said, you were talking about Facebook. A lot of young people aren't even on Facebook; they're on different other social medias. But there's the whole thing of compare and despair. There's a huge amount of checking out how people are comparing to others. And a lot of people will say, I'm more comfortable looking at my phone than sitting and talking to a real person.
Mhm.
And you want to encourage that. Of course, right now that's being limited, but you certainly understand why young people with their prefrontal, not totally developed, why you see many young people ignoring social distancing right now, because the need to connect is so strong, and it's just taking over. So there's some, like what you're reading and what you're experiencing as a teacher has become a way of life. And we can, there's a judgy thing about that we can feel, but we can also encourage them on how can they be more present in both places. And so one of the things that has been shown in research is to be, if you're going to post, and I try to help my young person with this, is to take a breath and to post positive. Because when people see a lot of negative posts or enter into the negative posts by practicing an ego state of anger or whatever, they end up feeling worse. And the research shows if they can learn to take a couple steps back and then, ask themselves, is this post going to harm anybody? Does it have any purpose? What can I do with this post? Just to have a little step in there that they think about before they post can help them feel a little more engaged in the process and help them feel better. That research shows that. So example, every time we pick up a smartphone, we have some cortisol and some adrenaline and dopamine are released, all three. So every time you pick up a phone or you're looking at social media, these three things are happening physiologically also. And so the accumulation of that and the draw of coming back to social media, like what you were saying, is incredibly strong. And what I'm seeing in my practice with young people, Paul, is also young people that were very sports oriented and out there and moving around, kind of apathy and malaise and not really even getting out of their pajamas sometimes. And they're getting tired of it because this has been going on for a while. So encouraging them also to have a routine every day, and even sometimes it gets to take a shower every day, because and it encourages us, if you don't want to go out walking by yourself in the neighborhood where you live, ask one of your parents to go with you or walk the dog, because moving them in space, which you're used to seeing with kids in real life when they come into the university, isn't happening as much right now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's, if we're completely honest and we pay attention to a lot of people who've created social media, some of them have pretty much admitted that they have gone out of their way to utilize social psychology to addict people, not just young people, but all people, to their product.
Yeah.
And the former, I think, VP of Facebook or something, came out and said that, he actually felt bad now having children about what they've done. So now it becomes a balancing act on top of a psychosocial way of being. And it's tricky times. We can pine for the old days.
Right.
The old days weren't always good, but it seemed to be a little more simpler when it comes to social interaction. So we now have a new, meta level of communication that just didn't exist 20 years ago.
Exactly. Yeah. And you're right. The whole phenomena of addiction online is very much set up by the people who create the platforms, like you say, and helping our young people understand that, what happens to them and why it's so hard to get off, and that it's actually a manipulation. So what I try to encourage them is let you use social media, don't let it use you. And what you're talking about is the way the companies and the way the platforms are using people, and how we have to be aware of how can we take charge and still get the benefit. Because let's face it, social media is here to stay, and it's all hypnotic. And as hypnotherapists, we need to make their experience online also more evocative. Now, I have a technique that I've been using for a while. I've adapted it now to, since we're all virtual, as a teletherapy. It's called the inner selfie technique. And inner selfie is just a construct, but it's basically something people can resonate with. We get a lot of laughs out of it, but it's really an ego strengthening awareness, and getting somebody back into their bodies and getting them into a sense, as we're looking for resources, as we're resourcing our young people, to identify and just give them a silly name or whatever to help them bounce back into themselves. So the inner selfie technique, for example, Paul, you may not be familiar with what I'm doing, but would be that I would work with somebody in trance. They would be familiar with breath and somatic, where things are happening in their body. We would be welcoming the ego state that's maybe anxiety or insecure, and try to work with that as being more of a resource even to help them, because we don't want to get rid of everything. And then using their smartphone when I was in the office with them, and when I'm back in the office, I'll do this again. I would then film them and have them talk from their resource state of strength or confidence, talk to the insecure part, or talk to the anxious part, or talk to the depressed part. So for example, I would say, so when you're feeling insecure about your friends talking and creating a drama you don't want to get involved in, what would you like to say to yourself? And because we've practiced the ego strengthening, they will talk, I will film them. And then they have what I call an inner selfie. It's basically their own app. It's their ego strengthening app that they can access 24/7. So if they'd much rather see themselves than us, and you're there as their coach, and the ego strengthening app, basically the inner selfie technique, can be accessed anytime, and we can update it at any time. And I have found that to be useful. So now that we're virtual, I have them film. We do the same thing, that they, instead of me holding it, they will hold it, and there's a lot of checks. So that's something we can do using some of the devices that are being used, but to help that actually let them ground themselves and come into themselves in an experiential way.
Could you talk a little bit more about the comment you made earlier about cyberspace as sacred space?
Yes, I will. You mean, what I meant by that is when we're connecting with someone online, as a therapist, as a human being, talking with you now, we're being sincere. We are creating a space between us, and we can make it come more alive, more real in different ways through just in terms of tone, in terms of closeness to the screen, in terms of our use of hand, anything we can do to make it feel more felt sense with our client, and that it's a sacred, respectful place where a lot can happen, where magic happens. I never know where we're going to go, what exactly is going to happen. Amazing things happen, and the amazing things happen online, just like in our offices. Mm-hmm. And so that's been a wonderful transition to be able to feel comfortable with this medium. Mm-hmm. As a therapist who is trying to work with people and their use of social media,
Right.
Yeah.
So it's not so much trying to get somebody to do something different. Let's say, trying to you need to get off social media, or you need to put their phone down more often, and all that. And all that's most of the time probably true.
Right.
It's utilizing what it's like good therapy anyway, utilizing what they're already using mm-hmm. to create an outcome that's beneficial for the goals you and your clients have.
Yes. Obviously, we do talk about times to get off of social media or times to get out in nature. I do a lot of encouraging for people to get outside. Mm-hmm. And there's been some research on, I think it's called co-construction theory or something, where you can use the smartphone, for example, to enjoy nature more. If people can't put it down, maybe they're taking pictures. Maybe they're using the GPS to find the park. Maybe they are experiencing something, but they're in nature, or they're listening to music. I try to work with my clients also on the difference between solitude and loneliness, and how that can be experienced in terms of being comfortable with being alone by yourself off all social media, and what that's like, even if for them it's only 5 or 10 minutes. Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. It's a matter of them having that experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. Some of the things you're saying, though, it also, we're focusing on adolescence, but it has
young adult. It goes all the way up.
All the way up. It's you're talking about posting positive things.
Yes.
It's, and I'll just be real blunt.
Yeah.
People in our field who we share social media interactions, some of the things that they post, I just wonder. It's like maybe you need to go back and sit on the couch instead of be the therapist, because this constant negative.
Oh, it's rampant, right? Exactly. And I have to say, everything my focus at the beginning of all this was with adolescents and young adults till 30, because that's when your brain stops, developing as much. But as I've worked with it, and social media is a part of all of our fabric of life, I've worked with this issue with people in their 70s and 80s who are still on Facebook comparing themselves, mm-hmm. Are posting these negative, hateful, political stuff, and yet they're being affected by it's just exactly what you're saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's just I think the old thing, if you can't say anything nice, don't say anything, seems to get lost in social media. Do you think that particularly even for adults, it just brings out our narcissistic side, that we have to let everyone know how we feel, and we suddenly we can't be offended, and we're just doing, and I'm talking about we as adults, we're actually doing the very thing that we seem to be criticizing the younger people for doing, but somehow maybe because we work from 9 to 5 and we might not be on it as much, it gives us absolution of that, but it's the same thing.
I totally agree with you. I totally, absolutely. And, this is where our responsibility comes to live our lives as people, both online and off. The other thing about this, when I say ego states practicing online, is that many people who would never do it in real life, studies have shown, will totally take, let's say, an ego state of anger and blow just blow it out to somebody online that they would never do in real life, which is not necessarily helpful.
To say the least.
So I try to be honest, this, like you say, it's what we're talking about goes through all the generations.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the young people have a lot of things they can teach us also. And the way they have coped with a lot of the stuff going on has been amazing to me. And in my book, I talk about, the smartphone being like a marriage, and it goes through different stages, the 7 stages of smartphone attachment. And, you've got your attraction age, your attraction stage, your honeymoon stage, your in love stage, and then your sort of codependent stage, which is where a lot of people are getting stuck. And then people do get disillusioned and they'll get off for a little bit, and then they'll take some time off, but then they'll come back on. So what you want at the end of that is to have the rapprochement and acceptance stage where you are using social media, it's not using you. Mm-hmm. So anyway, and that can be used with anybody at any age.
I find that maybe once a year it's good for me to not do those things. And we in our professions we kind of have to, even if we have a business page or something, even our personal page sometimes end up being a little business oriented. But sometimes I think it's good. I've taken 2 or 3 months off. I'll let everyone know, here's my email if you need me, and I find that it's good. It's like you take a vacation from work, you take a vacation from other activities. I mean, why not from social media? But then
I think it's great. I applaud you for that. I don't think it's that easy to do. If I do my time off, it's not that long, but I will take time off. Mm-hmm. Because I know it's so important to, what in the perfect world, we're all in real life and we're creating the oxytocin between us and things like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what advice would you have to a therapist who has trouble connecting with these adolescents and they want to start investigating, maybe using, if not directly social media, internet-based applications, but metaphoric ways to connect with them? Do you have any quick advice that somebody might help somebody to connect better with their adolescents?
You mean a therapist?
Right.
Yeah. I think being curious, really having curious questions that are showing that person online how interested you are, whether you have to utilize what you see in their bedroom or ask them what music, anything you can do as we do as therapists, you do the same thing online. So if a person is having trouble connecting with an adolescent online, they may have had trouble connecting with them in their office. Mm-hmm. And I would just go back to be authentic, be sincere, be curious, show you care. I know that sounds simple.
Well, but that's the foundation. I mean, and unfortunately, a topic for another discussion, but we are so, as a field, enamored of techniques and models, theories, that we forget that those are the most crucial elements that lead to change.
You're absolutely right. And really, we know as Ericksonians that it will take us anywhere. We don't know where it's going to take us, but we know that if we're tuned in, we're oriented toward, um, we can make a connection with that person.
Mm.
And 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 uh, practice that. I hope that's what you were looking for, because I do think there's, we get too formulaic, and good therapy doesn't happen with formulas. We need to know our stuff, but we need to be spontaneous and be real.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, what's the best place for people to find out about you and your work?
Oh, okay. I have a website, www.tobigoldfus.com, and my name is spelled Tobi, Goldfus, Goldfus. And on that, you can find my links to the publication. You can find different things on that, and philosophy, and how to contact me.
Great. Well, I appreciate you taking time out of your very busy schedule to talk to me today. And I think you've given a lot of food for thought for people, particularly us older and older therapists that are trying to understand even how to turn their phones on sometimes. That there's some wisdom in exploring those kind of avenues. So I really appreciate you being with me today.
Well, you're welcome. And like I said, I am no techno whiz. My son could tell you that. But it's more about the connection. It's all about the connection.
Right, right, great.